Samuel L. Jackson humiliates Jimmy Kimmel live, and the studio falls silent. It was supposed to be just another late-night talk show interview in Las Vegas. Bright lights, a warm audience, scripted jokes, everything under control. Jimmy Kimmel was at the helm, as usual. Samuel L. Jackson, the guest of the night, walked into a standing ovation, ready to promote yet another blockbuster. But what no one expected was that, within minutes, the laughter would turn into a live confrontation that left the studio in absolute silence. Have you ever seen a Hollywood legend flip the script on national television? More importantly, have you ever wondered what happens when someone decides to stop smiling and start speaking their mind, even in front of the cameras, even in front of power? The tension didn't arrive suddenly. It built up, sharp glances, jokes with hidden barbs, and an uneasiness in the air that felt almost tangible. Kimmel, with his usual irony, thought he could control the interview as always. But this time, he was sitting across from a man who doesn't tolerate being interrupted, much less belittled. What followed wasn't just a clash between two celebrities. It was a raw portrait of the fractures within the entertainment industry, a collision of generations, of race, of values. And at the center of it all, a question that still echoes. Who, after all, has the right to be outraged? Get ready. What you're about to see isn't acting. It's truth being laid out on the red carpet. And no one walked away unscathed. The stage was a spectacle in itself, a newly opened studio in Las Vegas, with 300 people in the audience, 8K cameras, perfect lighting, and a live band warming things up with soul classics. Jimmy Kimmel, impeccably dressed, was cracking jokes about the desert heat and the nearby casinos, drawing easy laughs. Everything pointed to yet another night of polished entertainment, where celebrities come in, promote their movies, and leave with hollow praise. But something was different in the air that night. Outside the studio, posters featuring Samuel L. Jackson's face announced the triumphant return of an icon to the big screen, 75 years old, 50 years in the business, over 100 films. The teaser for the show, posted hours earlier on social media, promised an unmissable and unexpected interview. And that's exactly what it delivered, though not in the way Kimmel expected. From the start, something felt off. Jackson entered in his unmistakable style, dark sunglasses, upright posture, a slight smile at the corner of his mouth. But behind the charismatic exterior was a man tired of forced smiles. The audience, carried away by the charm of both men, barely noticed they were about to witness something far bigger than a simple interview. The dramatic irony was obvious to anyone who'd seen the teaser. Kimmel was about to be exposed. The audience watched with that delicious tension of knowing more than the characters on stage. A theatrical setup, sure, but ready to collapse with a single spark. It was a meeting of opposites, a host representing the status quo, and an actor who, after decades of scars, decided it was time to break the script. Everything was going as expected, predictable questions, shallow compliments, a few funny stories from behind the scenes. Jackson answered with grace, but didn't elaborate much. It was clear he wasn't there for flattery. And it was in this lukewarm atmosphere that Jimmy Kimmel decided to spice things up. With that passive-aggressive tone often mistaken for charm, Kimmel leaned forward and dropped what sounded like an innocent question. Don't you think you go a bit overboard with your criticism of Hollywood? I mean, with all due respect, it seems like you're trying to pick a fight with everyone. Silence. The audience gave a nervous laugh. Jackson crossed his arms, stared at the host, and without raising his voice, replied firmly. You say that because you've never been marginalized. I'm not picking a fight, I'm talking about my reality. The difference is, when we speak, you call it an attack. When you speak, it's an opinion. At that moment, I felt a chill. Because in that calm but razor-sharp response, the game changed. It was the first blow, dry, direct, and impossible to ignore. Kimmel's expression faltered for a moment. He tried to regain control with a joke, but it was already too late. In my opinion, that line from Jackson should be played on loop in film schools, in studio boardrooms, at awards shows that pretend to celebrate diversity. Because it reveals something fundamental. Those at the top often mistake critique for ingratitude. The triggering incident wasn't a shout. It was a question dressed as provocation, and a response that laid bare the chasm between two worlds. From that point on, there was no going back. The interview stopped being a show and became a confrontation. A duel between appearance and truth. And truth, my friends, showed up uninvited. After Jackson's firm response, the energy in the studio shifted. The audience, once laughing at every one of Kimmel's lines, grew more attentive, almost uneasy. It was as if everyone suddenly realized something real was unfolding. But instead of backing off, Kimmel did the opposite. He tried to reassert control. But let's be honest, Samuel. You've always been treated like a legend. You have a star on the Walk of Fame, awards, applause. You can't exactly say you've been ignored by the industry. Once again, that condescending "come on now" tone, trying to reduce a lifetime of struggle to a shelf full of trophies. Jackson smiled, but it was a joyless smile. "Oh, is that it? What I achieved erases everything I went through to get here," he said, his voice still low but heavy with meaning. "You think respect comes with a red carpet? I've had to swallow a lot over these 50 years. And you know what's exhausting? Being told I should be grateful just for being tolerated." The audience let out an instinctive "oh," like people witnessing an uncomfortable truth laid bare. Kimmel tried to change the subject, shifting to a behind-the-scenes story from the new movie, but Jackson didn't take the bait. "Every time one of us speaks up, you try to shut us down with smiles or sarcasm. That's not dialogue. That's control." The tension was building like a rope stretched to its limit. And honestly, I thought it was brave. Because Jackson knew he was swimming against the current. He could have stuck to the script, done the promo, and left. But he chose, live on air, to tear down the facade of neutrality Kimmel represents. With each sentence, the audience seemed to wake up. The talk show was becoming a courtroom, not of revenge, but of awareness. Kimmel no longer had the crowd in his hands. And Samuel L. Jackson, with the authority of someone who survived the industry, showed he had nothing left to lose, only the truth to speak. That's when Kimmel, now visibly uncomfortable, tried to delegitimize Jackson's message with a paternalistic tone, and that's when everything exploded. "But Samuel, you have to admit, a lot of people see you as a role model. Maybe being so harsh ends up dividing instead of uniting." That was it. The exact moment the interview turned into a battle. Jackson uncrossed his arms, took off his sunglasses, and looked directly into the camera, not at Kimmel, not at the audience. At the viewers at home. "Dividing who, Jimmy? You talk like we're all in the same boat. But some people are rowing, and others are just enjoying the view." He then turned to the host. "You want me to smile while the system swallows me whole. But let me tell you something," his voice now louder, firm, non-negotiable. "Legends get tired of injustice too." The words landed like a hammer. The studio fell into silence for 2 seconds that felt like an eternity. Then the applause began. Hesitant at first, then growing until it filled the entire studio. Respect isn't asked for. It's demanded. That was the final verdict. A simple sentence, but loaded with 50 years of career, resistance, and buried frustrations. The camera caught Kimmel trying to force a smile, but his eyes gave him away. He knew he had lost control. And more than that, he'd been exposed. In that moment, Samuel L. Jackson was no longer promoting a movie. He was promoting awareness. Shedding light where only makeup had been applied for decades. It was the kind of climax that needs no special effects, because it's powered by a truth so potent no editing can erase it. Right there, at the peak of the confrontation, it became clear that stage no longer belonged to Jimmy Kimmel. Samuel L. Jackson took a deep breath, put his sunglasses back on, and looked once more at the audience, now on their feet, applauding. There was nothing left to be said. He stood up slowly, unhurried, like someone who knows exactly the weight of the moment. Walked to the edge of the stage, turned to the camera, and said, "If telling the truth makes me controversial, so be it. But don't ask me to be silent just because it makes you uncomfortable." And he left. No goodbyes, no theme music, no cuts. Just the sound of applause filling the studio while Kimmel sat frozen, staring into the void like someone who just realized they lost something they never thought could be taken: control of the narrative. In that triumphant exit was the true ending of the show. It wasn't about the movie anymore, or the talk show. It was about the power of saying no, of refusing to keep feeding a circus that survives on silence in the name of ratings. And the audience? The same crowd that laughed at Kimmel's jokes at the beginning now watched him in silence, uneasy. A heavy silence that speaks louder than 1,000 well-written scripts. How many times have you seen someone give up fame to stand by a principle? And more importantly, would you have the courage to do the same in front of millions? The Las Vegas studio was never the same after that night. Not because the set changed, but because someone had the guts to tear up the script live on air. And to make it clear that sometimes, the greatest act of resistance is simply getting up and walking away. What happened in that studio was more than entertainment. It was a rupture. A necessary clash between the truth of those who've lived on the margins and the comfortable facade of those who've always had the mic. And maybe the most unsettling thing about it all is the fact that Samuel L. Jackson didn't say anything outrageous. He simply said what so many think, but few dare to say out loud, in front of the cameras, in front of the system. Jimmy Kimmel wasn't just unmasked, he was forced to face his own hypocrisy. He tried to use humor as a shield, tried to hide behind the forced diplomacy of talk shows. But that day, none of it worked. Because cynical laughter doesn't stand a chance against raw truth. Jackson's act, getting up and walking out, was political, artistic, and deeply human. A reminder that fame doesn't erase wounds. That applause doesn't replace respect. And above all, that some voices can no longer be reduced to safe entertainment. This story isn't just about an actor and a host. It's about all of us. About how we react when the mask comes off live. About the silence that follows an inconvenient truth. And about the urgency to listen, even when what we hear pulls us out of our comfort zone. In the end, it wasn't Kimmel who ended the show. It was Jackson who decided when it was over. And maybe that's the most powerful lesson of all. When you speak the truth, you never need to wait for the next question. Because sometimes, the most revolutionary moment is simply to stand up and walk away. So, what did you think of this historic showdown between Samuel L. Jackson and Jimmy Kimmel? A rare moment when truth beat the script, and courage spoke louder than the show. If you felt the impact of this conversation, you know what to do, leave your like below. That's how we know you want more content that goes beyond the obvious. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any episode of this saga, or any other story that'll make you see things differently. And of course, share this video with that friend who needs to hear a raw, unfiltered truth, that debate no one dares to start. Let's spread this energy, because here, there's no room for complicit silence, only for active voices. After all, every great show needs a conscious audience. And you, are you ready to be part of it? See you in the next video, where we'll keep breaking taboos and bringing stories that truly matter. Thanks.